My entitled family wants to take my house and give it to my brother, even though they kicked me out. How would you feel if, after everything you've been through, your own family decided to take away the only thing you have left? My house is the only thing that ties me to the place I once called home, and now my family wants to take it from me and give it to my brother, as if I never even existed here. The very people who should have loved and supported me have betrayed me. I spent my whole life trying to prove my worth, but it seems all my efforts were in vain. Now I'm left alone against a world that's ready to destroy me. My name is Lucy, and I've always had a complicated relationship with my family. I grew up in a typical American household where life was never easy. My relationship with my mother, Mary, was a constant source of tension. She always found flaws in me, always criticized, never supported. I tried to be a good daughter, tried to meet her expectations, but it was useless. Nothing I did was ever enough. My brother John was the family's favorite, and that was always clear. A few years ago, a huge conflict changed everything. I said what I'd been holding inside my whole life, and my words were the final straw. They kicked me out of the house, leaving me with nothing. At that moment, I felt like I lost everything. My family, my support, my sense of security. I had to start life over from scratch, with nothing and no hope. I lived in a small apartment, worked 2 jobs just to survive. But I didn't break. I fought for my place in this world, even though I was all alone. After years of hard work, I managed to buy a portion of the house they kicked me out of. It was my way of proving to myself that I could achieve something, despite everything that had happened. I thought that now I could finally live in peace, that I'd finally found my place. But I was wrong. Now my family is interfering in my life again, trying to take this house away from me. They want to give it to John, as if I don't matter at all. This isn't just unfair, it's a betrayal that cuts deep into my soul. Life has always tested me, and the challenges keep getting harder. As a child, I thought all my problems would disappear when I grew up. But now, as an adult, I realize that problems don't go away. They just take different forms. My family has always been my biggest challenge. Growing up, I tried to find my place in the world, find my purpose, but I always felt misunderstood and undervalued. And now that I've found my place, my family is trying to take even that away from me. My mother always believed that I should live life the way she thought best. Her controlling nature and desire to dictate everything around her ruined my childhood and continue to overshadow my life even now. She never acknowledged my achievements, but she was always quick to point out my mistakes. My brother John, on the other hand, was her pride and joy. He always received more attention, more love, more support. His mistakes were always forgiven, his achievements always praised. I was always in the background, and that left deep scars in my soul. When they kicked me out, it was the most painful blow. I was left alone without support, without understanding. At that time, I felt like I lost everything. I ended up on the streets with not a penny to my name. I didn't know how to go on, how to find the strength to rise after such a fall. But I didn't give up. I worked 2 jobs, day by day, trying to piece myself back together. I knew that no one would help me, that I had to fight for my life on my own. And now, after managing to rebuild my life, after being able to buy back part of the house, my family is trying to destroy me once again. They've taken me to court to strip me of the house and give it to John. They say I don't deserve it, that I was never responsible enough. It's incredibly painful. They've always considered me less valuable, less important, and now they want to take away the last thing I have left. I'm once again without support. No one is on my side. I feel like I'm alone against the world once again. My lawyer says I have a chance to win this case, but I know it's going to be tough. I don't have the money for long court battles, and I don't have the strength to keep fighting a family that has always had the upper hand. I feel drained and broken, but I can't let them take this house away from me. I can't lose everything I've fought for all over again. Every night, I think about how things could have been different if my parents loved me the way they loved John. If they had supported me instead of constantly criticizing and belittling me. I think about how my life could have turned out if they hadn't kicked me out, if I had a family that stood by me during tough times. But those are just dreams that will never become reality. My reality is a constant struggle to survive. to have the right to be myself. I don't know how long I can keep up this fight. Every day feels like a new challenge, a new blow from fate. Sometimes it feels like I can't keep going, that it's all too much for me. But I have no other choice. If I give up, they'll win. They'll destroy me completely, and I'll be left with nothing. This house is my only source of stability, the only thing left from my past life, and I can't let them take that away from me. Every time I step into court, I feel the ground slipping from under my feet. I see my family sitting there looking at me with disdain, and it tears me apart inside. They see me as the enemy, someone to be destroyed. But I'm still trying to understand why. What did I do so wrong that they decided I don't deserve love and support? Why did I become the target of all their attacks? My mother, Mary, always said I needed to be more responsible, that I should do more for the family. But when I tried to find myself in this world, when I tried to live life on my own terms, they turned their backs on me. They kicked me out because I refused to follow their rules, because I wanted to live my life. And now, when I've managed to find my place, they're trying to break me again. This fight is wearing me down. I don't even know what's right anymore. I constantly feel guilty, like everything I do is a mistake, but I know I can't give up. I have to fight for myself, for my right to live, for the house I earned through my hard work. But the fear of losing, of them taking away the last thing I have, is always with me. Every day when I wake up, I feel the weight of this court battle. I think about how different things could have been if my family had supported me, if they hadn't turned their backs on me. But those thoughts only deepen my pain. They remind me that I've always been alone in this fight, and that knowledge tears me apart inside. My brother John has always been the one who was supported and loved. He's always been better at everything, always achieved more than I did. And even now, as he tries to take my house, my mother Mary stands by his side. She's always chosen him, always been on his side, and that hurt me more than anything else in my life. I've always been less important to them, always someone they could disregard. This court case is destroying me, but I know I have to keep fighting. It's the last thing I have left, and I can't let them take it away from me. I can't let them win. I have to stand up for myself, even if it means going against everyone. But the fear, the pain, and the loneliness are my constant companions. I don't know how much longer I can hold on, but I do know one thing. I can't give up. When I realized that my family had truly decided to fight for my house, the first thing I felt was panic. I didn't know where to start or whom to turn to for help. I was terrified even to think about losing everything I had managed to build over the past few years. At that moment, I understood that I couldn't handle this on my own. I needed the help of a professional who could protect my rights and fight for me. I found a lawyer, David, through recommendations from acquaintances. They said he was one of the best in cases involving property and family disputes. When I first came to him for a consultation, I was scared and nervous. It was hard for me to focus on his words because all I could think about was how everything could fall apart. But David managed to calm me down. He spoke confidently and explained the legal aspects in a way that made me start to believe I had a chance of winning. The first step was to gather all the documents related to the house. I found every piece of paper, every agreement that proved my ownership. David meticulously reviewed everything I brought and said that we had strong arguments. For the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. It was a tiny spark, but it helped me not to fall into complete despair. While David prepared for court, I couldn't stop thinking about how it all began. I recalled my childhood when my brother John was always the center of attention. Mother always supported him, even when he did something wrong. His mistakes were always covered up or justified, while I was constantly criticized for the smallest things, and I felt like I would never be good enough for her. This feeling left a deep mark on my soul. Even now, as an adult, I still try to prove to myself that I am worth something. When I bought a share of the house, it was my way of telling myself and the world that I could achieve something on my own. But now, with my family trying to take this house away from me, I feel like that little girl again who was never taken seriously. During the preparation for court, I thought a lot about my mother. Why did she always support John? Why did she never try to understand me? These questions have haunted me for years, and I never found answers. Maybe she saw something in me that she didn't like, something that reminded her of her own failures. But that's just speculation. Sometimes I think she simply didn't know how to love me the way she loved John. Talking to David provided not only legal support, but also moral support. He was always calm and focused, even when I began to panic. He reminded me that I had a right to this house, that I had earned it through my own hard work. It was important for me to hear that because deep down I always doubted my own worth. I was afraid that if I lost this case, it would confirm all the doubts I've carried with me my entire life. During the preparation, I learned a lot about my rights and how the system works. It turned out that it wouldn't be as easy for my mother and brother to take the house from me as they thought. But that didn't mean the case would be simple. They had hired an experienced lawyer who was ready to fight for them until the end. I knew the trial would be tough and exhausting, but I was ready to fight. As we approached the first court hearing, I felt a wave of fear rising inside me. I was terrified of sitting across from the family that had betrayed me. I didn't know how I would be able to endure their looks, the words they might say, but I knew I had to be strong. This was my chance to prove that I could stand up for myself, that I wouldn't let them break me again. When I arrived at the courthouse, I saw them, my mother and John, sitting together, discussing something with their lawyer. They didn't even glance my way, as if I were a ghost, as if I didn't exist. It hurt, but I forced myself to focus. This wasn't the time for emotions. It was time to act, time to fight for myself and my home. During the hearing, David presented our arguments clearly and convincingly. He talked about how I bought part of the house, how I invested money and time into it. He emphasized that I have a legal right to this home, and that my family's attempt to take it away is nothing but an effort to break me. Listening to him, I felt my confidence slowly return. I realized that I'm no longer that little girl who could be belittled and humiliated. However, during cross-examination, my family's lawyer started asking questions that made me doubt myself again. He tried to show that I'm not capable of handling responsibility, that I'm not mature enough to own a house. He brought up past mistakes I had tried to forget, making me feel like everything I had done was in vain. But David was there, objecting and defending me, and that helped me hold on. After the first hearing, I was exhausted both physically and emotionally. I realized that every step of this process would be difficult for me, that each session would be a battle, but I couldn't give up. I knew this would be a long journey, but I had to see it through. I had to prove that I am not the person my family always believed me to be. I had to show that I am strong and that I can stand up for myself. Every time I went to court, memories of my childhood resurfaced. I recalled how I tried to gain my mother's attention, how I tried to be better, hoping she would praise me. But the praise never came. There was only criticism and constant comparisons to John. I always felt inadequate, always thought I needed to try harder to earn her love. But now I understand that love was never meant for me. It was only for John, and it hurt to admit that. I began to realize that my fear of losing the house wasn't just about losing material things. It was the fear of losing my last chance to prove that I am worth something. It was the fear of being left with nothing if I lost this case. But I also understood that even if I did lose, it wouldn't define my value as a person. That was an important lesson I needed to learn to move forward. David's words helped me see the situation from a different perspective. He said that this house is just a part of my life, but not my whole life. That I am more than just a homeowner, and that my worth isn't determined by whether I win this case or not. Those words were crucial in helping me regain my balance. I realized that I shouldn't let this process define who I am. Each time memories of my childhood surfaced, I tried not to let them drag me back into despair. I understood that how I was raised influenced my life, but that didn't mean I couldn't change my future. I was no longer the little girl trying to earn her mother's love. I was a woman fighting for her right to dignity and respect. Gradually, I began to change my attitude toward this court case. I started seeing it not as a threat, but as an opportunity to show that I am strong and independent. I knew my family was trying to break me, but I decided that this time they wouldn't succeed. I resolved to fight to the end, even if it meant standing against everyone. The trial continued, and each session was a new challenge. But I was no longer as afraid as I was in the beginning. I learned to trust myself, trust my lawyer David, and not let fear control me. I realized that regardless of the outcome, I had already won. I had conquered my fear, my doubts, my insecurities, and that was important. Every time I saw my mother and brother in court, I felt pain. But that pain no longer destroyed me. It reminded me why I was fighting and that I had to keep moving forward. I knew they might never understand me, might never support me, but that no longer mattered. What mattered was that I was doing this for myself, for my future. I also started thinking more about what would happen after this court case. What would I do when it was all over? I realized that this house is just one part of my life, and that regardless of the outcome, I would keep moving forward. I would rebuild my life, even if it meant starting from scratch. But now I knew I had the strength to do it, and that gave me hope. At the end of each day, I remembered David's words that this process doesn't define me as a person. I realized he was right. I am more than just a participant in a court case. I am strong, I can stand up for myself, and I won't let anyone break me again. These thoughts helped me find the strength to keep going, despite all the challenges that still lay ahead. The trial was tough, but it was also a moment where I rediscovered myself. I understood that I am not who my family tried to make me out to be. I was no longer trying to prove my worth to them. I was proving it only to myself. And that was the most important lesson I could take from this situation. I knew that regardless of the outcome, I had already won because I had learned to value myself and my achievements. Each time I saw my mother and John in court, I felt my heart clench with pain. But now I knew that this pain wouldn't destroy me. It would become part of my experience, but it wouldn't define my future. I decided I would use this experience to become stronger, wiser, and more confident in myself. During the trial, everything was so tense that each day felt like a real test for me. My nerves were on edge, and every new encounter with my mother and brother poured salt on wounds that hadn't yet healed. I tried to keep myself together, not to show weakness, but it was difficult. Every action they took, every word they said, was aimed at pushing me to the brink. I couldn't understand how those who were supposed to love and support me could manipulate my life so cruelly. The climax of the trial came when my family's lawyer tried to use certain documents against me. They claimed they had a signed agreement from me, supposedly stating that I had given up my rights to the house in favor of John. I remember the fear that gripped me. The documents looked genuine, and I couldn't comprehend where they had come from. My mind was in chaos, and I started doubting whether I had made some mistake in the past that I had forgotten about. However, David immediately sensed something was off. He requested time to carefully study these documents, and with every word he spoke, I felt hope returning. He was convinced it was a forgery and began searching for evidence that my signature had been faked. I saw my brother and mother sitting in the courtroom, exchanging confident glances. They thought they were winning this game, that their plan was working. But I wasn't going to give up without a fight. David started digging deeper. He reached out to an expert specializing in signature analysis. The results of the examination were astounding. It turned out the documents were indeed forged, and the signature on them wasn't mine. This was a turning point in the case. I felt a heavy burden lift off my shoulders. My suspicions were confirmed. My mother had knowingly manipulated the documents to take the house from me and give it to John. This moment was like a knife to my heart. I always knew our relationship was far from ideal, but I never thought she would go to such lengths. I felt a mix of pain, betrayal, and anger. How could she do this to her own daughter? All I wanted was a bit of support, a bit of understanding, but instead I got a stab in the back. But now, I had the chance to launch a counterattack. David was ready for this strike. He presented all the evidence of forgery to the court, and it was a major blow to my brother and mother. Their facial expressions were unforgettable. They realized their plan had failed, and now they had nothing left to back up their claims to my house. It was the first true feeling of victory in this entire process, and I knew the fight wasn't over yet. My mother tried to justify herself, saying she didn't know the documents were forged, that it was some kind of mistake. But I could see her words held no weight. Everyone understood it was just an attempt to excuse her role in this manipulation. Her voice trembled, and I realized that for the first time in a long while, she was no longer in control. This gave me even more strength to keep fighting. When David finished his speech, I felt like we finally had a chance to win. He clearly demonstrated that I had become a victim of an attempt to deceive me by my own family. It was painful to admit, but at the same time, I felt liberated. Liberated from the burden I had carried for years. I realized that now I not only had to protect my home, but also defend my right to dignity, which they tried to strip away from me. The judge was shocked by what he saw and immediately ordered an investigation into the possible forgery of the documents. This was an important step in my favor. I saw my brother start to get nervous, trying to avoid my gaze. He had always been my mother's favorite, always got what he wanted, but this time, his world began to crumble. I knew that now I had a chance to win, and I wasn't going to back down. In the following weeks, the situation began to shift. My family realized they no longer controlled the situation. David kept gathering evidence, and each new fact only strengthened our position. I saw how my mother and brother tried to come up with new arguments, but they no longer had the confident demeanor they displayed at the beginning of the process. They began to realize their plan had failed. It was an incredible feeling to see justice finally prevail. I felt that, for the first time in a long time, I had control over my life. I was no longer the little girl who was constantly belittled and criticized. I had become a woman who stood her ground and wouldn't let anyone humiliate her again. This was my moment, and I knew I had to seize it fully. At the final court session, David presented our final arguments. He spoke about how I had to fight for my place in life, how I built my future on my own without family support. He emphasized that my rights to the house had been violated and that the attempted forgery of documents was direct evidence of how far my family was willing to go to destroy me. I sat there listening to him, and with each word I felt more empowered. I realized this was not just a legal battle for the house. This was my personal fight for myself, for my independence, and my right to be happy. Every day of this process had been tough, but it made me stronger, and now I was ready for whatever came next. The judge carefully listened to both sides and announced he would make a decision in a few days. Those few days were the hardest of my life. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. All I could think about was what would happen next. It was a true test of my endurance. But I knew that no matter the outcome, I had done everything I could. Now, all that was left was to wait. When the moment finally came, when the judge announced his decision, I felt my heart stop. He declared the documents were forged and ruled that I had full rights to my home. It was like thunder on a clear day. I heard those words and couldn't believe my ears. It was an incredible feeling of relief and joy. I had won. For the first time in my life, I had won. This moment was the culmination of my entire life. I felt the heavy burden I had carried for years finally lift. I had proven to myself that I was strong, that I could fight and win. My home remained mine, and it wasn't just a house. It was my freedom, my right to the life I had chosen for myself. When the judge announced the decision, I saw my brother and mother standing there, stunned. They couldn't believe they had lost. Their world had collapsed, and now they had to come to terms with the fact that they no longer controlled my life. It was pure satisfaction to see them, who always considered themselves victorious, now forced to accept their defeat. After the trial, I walked out of the courthouse with a feeling that I was finally free from the shadow of my family. I was no longer under their control, no longer had to prove my worth to them. I was free, and it was the best feeling in the world. I knew I could now start a new life, without the fear and pain they always brought into my life. This victory gave me a new perspective on myself and my future. I would no longer rely on others' opinions, especially those who tried to destroy me. I realized that my strength had always been within me, and now that I had found it, no one could take it away from me. I also understood that this situation, as it was, made me stronger. I learned to value myself, my work, and my achievements. This battle for the house was important not just because I kept my home, but because I found myself. And that was the most important thing that could have happened to me. When I returned home that day, for the first time in a long while, I felt real peace. This was a place I had earned through my efforts, and now it was fully mine. I knew I could now build my future the way I wanted, without fear, without pain, without betrayal. This was my life, and I was ready to live it to the fullest. This experience also taught me the importance of believing in yourself, even when everyone around you doubts you. It's important to stand up for your rights, even when it feels like the world is against you. And most importantly, I learned that no matter what happens in life, there's always a way to rise up and keep fighting. This victory became a symbol of my strength and my new beginning. I was no longer the broken woman they tried to destroy. I was strong, confident, and ready for any new challenges that might come my way. And now I knew that I could handle anything life threw at me. Every time I think back to this trial, I feel pride. Pride for not giving up, for finding the strength to fight to the end. It was a tough journey, but it was worth every minute. I know there will be more challenges ahead, but now I'm ready for them. I know I can overcome any obstacle because I've already done it. This trial was not only the culmination of my fight for the house, but also of my inner struggle for myself. And I won. And now when I look back on it, I feel nothing but pride and gratitude for having gone through it all and emerged stronger than ever. This trial changed my life. What began as a fight for my home turned out to be much more. It was a battle for my right to my own life, for dignity and independence. I went through incredibly tough challenges, faced betrayal from those I once considered the closest, and experienced moments when it seemed like the whole world was against me. But now I know that all of it was necessary for me to discover my true strength. After the court ruled in my favor, I felt a heavy burden lift from my shoulders. I no longer had anything to fear because I proved that I could stand up for myself, even when the odds seemed stacked against me. My home remained mine, but this victory gave me more than just property. It restored the confidence in myself that I had lost many years ago. My family, who always looked down on me and tried to take away everything I had, ultimately only made me stronger. Their attempt to break me became the test that I passed with honor. I realized how important it is to believe in yourself and stand up for your rights, even when everyone around you is against you. This battle showed me that I am much stronger than I thought, and that I can overcome any difficulties. Now, when I look at my house, I don't just see a building. I see a symbol of my struggle, my victory, and my strength. This place has become more than just a physical shelter. It's where I found myself and recognized my worth. I will never allow anyone to take that away from me. This experience taught me that even in the hardest situations, there is a chance to find the strength to fight. I learned to stand up for myself and no longer depend on the opinions of others. Now I know that no matter what life brings my way, I can handle it. I have become stronger, wiser, and more confident. And without a doubt, this is the greatest victory of my life. I'm grateful for this experience because it made me who I am today. I'm no longer a broken spirit. I am a victor. And now, when I look back at everything I went through, I feel nothing but pride and gratitude for finding myself and my place in this world.